What's going on today, guys? This is another walking reviews. Today I want to be taking a look at kind of an interesting case. This knife is a clone, except it's not a clone, because really there was never anything to clone, and I'll kind of get into that. This is a design by Malyshev. He has a few pieces for Custom Knife Factory. He's also a custom knife maker himself, and basically this was a design of his that never made it past the drawing board, or he just decided for whatever reason that he didn't want to make it, and it was picked up by the people who do clones on websites like Aliexpress and Alibaba, whatever. I'm not 100% sure about the websites. I have a friend who deals with people that work in China, and he had them pick this up for me while they were over there. I didn't order this through the website, so I can't really speak to that. What I've been told is the handle scales are titanium, and they are, I've measured them, they're about 3.5 inches long, a little bit less. The blade length is about 2.5 inches, and the cutting edge is about 2 inches. It's a really cool design. This does run on bearings. I've taken it apart. The flipping action is pretty good now that I've tuned it up a little bit. When this originally came, it was drenched in oil. The lock bar had never really been bent in, so the knife just kind of swung open. It didn't really flip at all. So I took it apart, and it's really simple construction. Screw there, that's it. That's the whole shebang. So yeah, I took it apart. I cleaned up the inside, cleaned up the blade, cleaned up the bearings. The bearings do appear to be ceramic. They were non-magnetic, and they appeared to be ceramic from what I've seen of ceramic bearings. So the knife does flip pretty smoothly now. The blade steel is supposedly D2. You can see it's got that nice high flat grind. Decent jimping. I love this finger choil and the way that the overall design works. Like, if I were to just try and hold this knife by the handle, I really couldn't get a grip on it at all. But with that finger choil, I mean, this is really comfortable to hold. It's a little bit wider than I would normally like to carry. This is a pretty wide knife, but it's not too thick. You know, it's decently thin. I like the way they did the two-tone on the titanium handle scales. That looks kind of cool. See, they got like a satin type finish on the flats, and then like a rougher stone wash or bead blast on the parts that are machined. The pivot is really simple. It's just a flathead screwdriver, or flathead screw through a like a female end there that they've also put, you know, space for a flathead in. I had to Loctite the pivot after I had cleaned it up and everything, and now the centering's not perfect, but that's as good as it got. The lockup is good. There's no blade wiggle or anything. There are some fit and finish issues with this knife, and I think that's probably the case with most of the things you order from those kind of websites. The milling that is done internally on these handle scales for the bearings to fit, it's too big, and so there's like extra room for the bearings to move around, and that can be a little, like, it feels a little bit weird when you're using the knife, basically. Also, you can kind of, I don't know if you can hear it, but you can move the handle scales back and forth just like a millimeter or so. It's not a lot, but they do actually, they're not completely solidly together. But again, I mean, once the knife locks up, that movement disappears, so you do have solid lock up here. I'm kind of torn with this knife. It's made me want the custom version of it, which is kind of, ideally that's what a clone would do. You would get it, you would say, oh wow, I like the design, whatever, let me go and buy the real thing. That's like the argument for clones. The ideal situation is someone buys the clone, realizes they like the design, and goes and gets the actual version of the knife, whether that be a clone of a Benchmade or a clone of a custom knife like this. And it worked in my case. I would love to have a well done version of this knife, but that doesn't exist because Anton Malyshev just decided that he didn't want to make it. He also did give his blessing for these cloners to make this knife. He said it was cool that a knife that he didn't have any desire to make but designed still ended up being made. So I didn't feel too bad about picking this up. You know, I don't feel like I'm taking food out of anybody's mouth by, you know, buying a clone. So yeah, there it is. I'm not going to really get into that clone debate because I can see positives on both sides of the argument. And the only reason I ended up okaying the purchase of this one for me was because I knew that no such knife would ever exist in a legitimate fashion. It would have to be the clone or nothing. So the weight on this is 3 ounces. Like I said, the handle scales, they are titanium. I checked them with a magnet. And they are pretty well machined. They're, you know, other than the tolerances of the fit and finish is where it's, you know, that's where the big leagues come in, is those really incredible tolerances, and this knife doesn't really have that. You can see how much space they needed between the blade and the bearings, because they're pumping out a lot of these, and they're pumping them out, you know, pretty inexpensively in order to sell them for what they sell them for. So you're not going to get the really incredible tolerances that some of these custom makers are able to achieve because they put in the time into the construction. And this thing probably didn't have much time put into it. It was probably, you know, pumped out on a machine and then quickly thrown together. They didn't even take the time to really bend the lock bar, like I said. But if you like this design and you realize that there's no other outlet for you to purchase it than through, you know, other means, I decided to go for it, and I'm glad I did. You know, aside from the issues that I've told you about, I do really like this design. It's a cool little knife, and it's not super overbuilt like you would get with some of the stuff out there, like a Direware maybe. This isn't like a 6-ounce sub 3-inch knife. This is 3 ounces, titanium frame lock. The edge is okay, it's not bad. The finish is a nice working finish. It's kind of like a bead blast / stonewash finish. Yeah, the action's okay now that I've tuned it up. Your mileage may vary, so that's a really big disclaimer I'd like to put out there. You could order this same knife from one of those websites and get something completely different. So be careful, but definitely a cool design if you guys want to check it out. All right, take it easy, guys. I'll see you in the next one.